Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump can use George Clooney's possible future congressional testimony or testimony in court against potentially Liz Cheney, Schiff, Kinzinger, Falsey, everyone that President Biden preemptively pardoned, where there's a question mark about his cognitive or issues pertaining to awareness. Was he cognizant of the pardon document that was being auto-signed? So if the Autopen issue, and hit subscribe to this channel right now, you will hear from the Trump administration. You will hear news about George Clooney essentially turning on Biden months back in a second, and why he did so. But really quickly, hit subscribe. This is an important story. The Democratic Party cannot simply unilaterally decide that the charade is over and that, well, sorry, America, we had our own internal performance art, or this, Democratic Party theater that we forced the country to endure for 4 years. And, we don't want Biden as president anymore. We don't want Biden to run as president anymore. He won his primary, but we don't have to have functioning primaries. Just ask Bernie Sanders. We could cheat any candidate we want in fake and phony primaries. And, this is a Democratic Party issue. We have the right to choose anyone we want in a presidential contest. And ask Bernie Sanders, ask Biden. The Democratic Party primary is simply performance art. We can just say that somebody won and then replace that person like they did with Biden. We can also pretend that our president, the most popular candidate of all time, was perfectly fine, had normal and functioning, had no cognitive issues and was completely normal and functioning, and then turn on a dime after one debate performance where everyone saw that there were indeed potential cognitive issues, where he was potentially one fry short of a Happy Meal. And America, you're just going to have to deal with it, and God forbid you ever question anything he does in his last days in office. That ain't flying. The country saw what took place from day one. We had a president who was not all there, to say the least. Democrats had to address this issue. George Clooney was at the forefront, wrote an article explaining, and you'll hear the rationale of the Trump administration in a second. Right here, was he tired? Okay, but our party leaders need to stop telling us that 51 million people didn't see what we just saw. Well, what did we just see? If there's a congressional investigation or a federal case prosecution against Cheney, Kinzinger, Schiff, the January committee, Falsey, potentially Hunter, although he probably knew that Hunter and everyone around him, all the other Bidens, preemptively pardoned. He probably wanted that for sure. But nobody knows if he wanted all the other last-second pardons. Okay, he wasn't there at the location signing the pardons. He was forced out because of potential cognitive issues that everyone saw in that was highlighted within an op-ed written by George Clooney, who again could testify against Biden's cognitive and his cognitive abilities in court or in Congress. But really quickly, this is Stephen Miller. What is he saying that Democrats or George Clooney disagree with? I'd like to know.
The president said, since this is an important point, by the way, it's not just that the pardons were signed with an Autopen. It's that clearly the former president, Joe Biden, had absolutely no awareness of or any clue about what was being signed in his name. He's on a beach in Delaware doing God knows what. In other words, you have all these instances where you can show that something was signed by an Autopen when Joe Biden was not even physically present, aware, around at all. And so the accumulation of evidence makes clear that Joe Biden had no awareness, no knowledge, no participation, and frankly in the administration of government for 4 years, but in particular, in this case, with respect to these pardons, which then means, of course, the Department of Justice has its own authorities to pursue as it sees fit. Any other questions?
Stephen, on the same note, are you aware of any investigations that the president has called for into any of the people who were on the January 6th committee?
Well, I mean, the president has been clear publicly for a long time about his view about the misconduct that has occurred. For example, the erasure of all of the records, what can only be described as one of the most preposterous cover-ups that we've ever seen. And again, the Department of Justice has its own authorities and is able to pursue those.
Then you have the issue of government records being destroyed. Really quickly, before we get to the discussion and the acknowledgement by the Democratic Party that Democrats were essentially deceiving the entire United States for less than 4 years regarding the mental acuity, or let's just say regarding the awareness of President Biden. The issue is an late 1860s Supreme Court decision pertaining to Ex parte Garland, and I explain that it does not apply to a preemptive pardon where the president has potential issues understanding what he's signing. Furthermore, the 1869 ruling that this fact check, this PBS fact check cites as well. And in 1869, the law undoubtedly is that when a pardon is complete, there is no power to revoke it. Oh, yes, there is. Yes, there is. The Supreme Court, if it's given evidence that Biden did not know what he was signing, which is a serious possibility. Again, I'm not saying for the wonderful morally superior who lie through their teeth and call everything a conspiratorial theory. I am not stating categorically that Biden had no knowledge of what he was signing with Kinzinger, Cheney, Schiff, Falsey, Hunter. What I am saying is that he was forced out by George Clooney, Democrats, donors, and the entire Democratic Party, including media and Hollywood, and all of his former supporters, because of one debate where the entire world saw he was one fry short of a Happy Meal. Number two, here, until a pardon is delivered, it may be revoked. How can a pardon be delivered if the president was possibly and potentially, okay? This is, if you say potentially and possibly not aware of what he was signing, that's a rational, logical vantage point, especially since George Clooney himself forced Biden out. Here's a little bit of what was taking place not long ago from a man said to have known he was signing pardons for Kinzinger, Cheney, and others.
We continue to hear from more prominent Democrats and donors that it's time for Joe Biden to step aside and have somebody else step up. Hillary Vaughn has been talking to Democrats on Capitol Hill in the wake of George Clooney saying, "We need a new nominee." He said it's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe Big Effing Deal Biden of 2010. Here's more reaction from Democrats on the Hill.
Speak about George Clooney calling for President Biden to drop out of the race.
I don't have anything to say about it. Yep. And we haven't made it through, so I'm sorry.
Do you have any concerns about the president's mental acuity?
I'm sorry, we haven't made it. I know.
Congressman Goldman, George Clooney is calling for President Biden to drop out of the race. He does not think that Democrats can win with him on the ticket. He also expressed major concerns about his mental fitness. What is your reaction to that?
I appreciate hearing Mr. Clooney's opinion, and we'll continue to deal with this within our Democratic family to make sure that we beat Donald Trump and protect democracy in the future.
Do you think people close to President Biden are being honest about his mental state?
Put so many of these Democrats in a tough spot, John. I mean, Clooney's saying emphatically in this note, we are not going to win in November with this president. On top of that, we won't win the House and we're going to lose the Senate.
Okay, so you don't have to be Nostradamus to have predicted that. I was saying that for the past 2 years, actually more than that, 3 years. The fact-checking articles do not address the issue. If you want to look at the 1869 ruling, and if you want to look at Ex parte Garland a couple of years earlier, none of the Supreme Court precedent addresses a president that was forced out by his own political party for mental acuity issues that potentially didn't know what he was signing. So George Clooney and Stephen Miller are literally on the same side of this issue. Hit subscribe to this. I mean, essentially, not literally, essentially on the same side of this issue. Hit subscribe. Thank you.